Right from the first look, people begin to wonder, and then they begin to ask questions.
To me, the reason I enjoy night photography or celestial photography is it kind of puts you in your place. It makes you realize how small you are and how insignificant you are in the universe. And if you had a bad day, the sun still comes up and the moon still comes up.
In this community, there's a very strong relationship with the moon. When a girl first gets her menstrual period, during those first 3 months, she's not allowed to move.
We have to bear in mind that whoever entered this place came either to celebrate or to be sacrificed. There were no other options.
One can say that in this community, the tradition of confinement has been going on for about 200 years.
If I can teach astronomy to 600 cyclists, for me, it's a privilege. Eventually, humans will populate the Milky Way, the galaxy, the universe.
Never before had we encountered such massive evidence of human and animal sacrifice.
The moon is our eternal companion at night, sterile, gray, and apparently unchangeable. Month after month, her image never changes. Her craters and mountains seem to have been there forever. However, her birth was the result of a violent story of transformations. As violent as the human sacrifices that people from pre-Columbian cultures carried out, inspired by the moon itself. Now we know that the moon came into existence as a giant ball of magma. It was created from matter left over from an impact upon Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. The magma started to cool down, forming a crust over the moon's surface. Some 4.3 billion years ago, the south pole of the moon suffered a giant impact, creating the largest crater in the whole solar system. This impact marked the beginning of a period that would greatly transform the surface of the moon. Giant collisions came, one after another, giving shape to the dark regions of the moon, usually known as oceans. Since the moon's core had not completely cooled down, lava started to emerge through the cracks caused by these collisions. Volcanic activity spread lava over the craters, covering them and then cooling down. Due to the high content of iron, lunar oceans reflect less light and therefore they appear darker. About 1 billion years ago, volcanic activity on the visible side of the moon stopped completely. Our natural satellite continued to receive impacts from objects within the solar system, but much smaller than in the first phases. That's how we arrive to the moon as we see it today. She still suffers from impacts, but they are fewer and less frequent. That is why we have the impression that the moon, our moon, is unchangeable, permanent, and eternal, almost like a goddess in the sky, watching over our destiny. We traveled to the north of Peru to discover a pre-Columbian culture that structured their entire lives by the influence of the moon. Our natural satellite was so important to that culture that they raised monumental buildings in its honor. They also held cruel human sacrifices, dedicated to our nocturnal friend that circles the sky. A few miles away from Trujillo, we find Chan Chan. This city began its construction around 1400 AD by the ancient Chimu people, who became the lords of this land. Chan Chan is the largest city made of mud bricks ever built by humans. UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Center.
Chan Chan was the capital of the Chimu Empire. The city had a population of around 100,000 inhabitants. Its reach, during its most successful time in history, was around 8 miles. Within this area, palaces, houses, artisan neighborhoods, parks, graveyards, and obviously temples were built. These temples were dedicated to the adoration of the sea and also to the stars in heaven.
The connection between Chan Chan and the moon fascinates Gabriel and many other researchers in the world. As a society depending on resources from the sea, they possibly worshipped the moon as a giver of life and for her role in regulating the tides. A few miles from Chan Chan, we find the Moon Pyramid, built by the Moche people.
We stand at the front of the Great Temple of the Moon in the Moche Valley, in the northern coast of Peru. This facade is a source of pride and evidence of great achievement. Imagine, around 1,500 years ago, when high buildings were not usual, to find a structure of this size, this stature, in the middle of the desert, and with such a huge investment, not only in public works, but also in man-hours, as well as in art. This is telling us that it was built to dominate and that at the same time, it was meant to impress. We must bear in mind that any person entering this building came here to either celebrate or to be sacrificed. There were no other options. Therefore, I believe the impression it generated, not only among the people who worked and lived here, but also among the people who came here in a religious context. It was a feeling of admiration, fear, respect, and at the same time, mystery. Here, we are at the lowest end in the main square of the Huaca of the Moon, and we are facing the mural paintings of the myths. It is called that because this place summarizes 3 natural elements that are always associated with the Mochina culture. The first is the element of nature. There are several animals and plants represented here. The second element is that there are human beings painted in different actions and, above all, in different roles. There are warriors, there are possibly priests, fishermen. There are even goldsmiths in the lower side. And the third part is that we have a cosmic element. We have a series of icons representing stars and planets. At the center of all this image composition, it is very clear that the moon gravitates in the middle and has been placed there intentionally. The moon as an element that gravitates. Because for pre-Hispanic cultures in Peru, the moon was believed to be more powerful than the sun for two reasons. First, because the moon appeared at night with great strength and the sun did not. Second, the moon had the power to appear both at daytime and at night. While the sun started a stellar journey that covered the entire kingdom during the day, but disappeared at night, and therefore the moon triumphed over the sun. For this reason, the moon has always been seen by local cultures as a more powerful body. Both the huaca of the sun and the huaca of the moon are perfectly oriented towards the north, which means that they were probably associated to a constellation, possibly Orion, which is a star that appears from the north. With the temple facing the north, one can easily keep track of the east-west trajectory that the moon follows during the night, and that the sun follows during the day. The recurring events guided by the stars were very important for this culture.
We travel with Gabriel to an archaeological excavation site in the surroundings of Trujillo. Gabriel has been told that there are bodies of children buried in these sacred grounds. We'll try to find the skeletons. Finding these remains is one way to develop an insight of the life led by the ancient inhabitants of this land, and their relationship with the moon and the stars thousands of years ago.
Vamos a continuar con las excavaciones en esta zona, así que vamos a hacer la unidad un 2x2 para continuar con lo que hemos estado haciendo en estos últimos tiempos.
Perfecto.
¿Sí?
Okay.
Vamos sacando los clavos.
We are on the Huanchaquito, at the site called Gramalote. This is 3,000 years old, before present times. This site really constitutes one of the first settlements of fishermen in the area, and also the place of origin of the idea of worshiping the sea and the stars, as well as the idea of worshiping the moon. In fact, we have found here a settlement of fishermen who were experts at catching sharks, as well as processing all the resources that the sea provided. What is interesting is that here, where we stand, we found a small temple, probably the temple belonging to the fisherman's village. And this village is perfectly aligned with the constellation of the Southern Cross.
Ya, vamos a comenzar a abrochar este sector de acá. Toda esta parte aquí.
What's interesting is that the Southern Cross is very important for fishermen, since it helps as a point of reference throughout the year, as well as to determine the fishing seasons. This is a fishing village from the early period. So we are speaking in the range of 1500 BC. That is 3,000 years ago, approximately. In these villages, the idea of marine divinities emerges, the worship, the use and the exploitation of marine resources, which, in time, will lead to the development of the social complexity that we have seen in places such as the Huaca de la Luna from the Moche culture, or the Chan Chan site in the Chimu culture.
Parece ser un mayero. Sí. Parece que es de hueso trabajado. Sí. Por el ancho que tiene el mayero, pareciera que se hubiera hecho para crear redes de tamaño intermedio como los peces que estamos encontrando en las excavaciones. Claro. Esto vamos a registrarlo y lo vamos a ubicar como hallazgo en este sector.
¿Qué? El contexto. Estamos en el sector oeste.
No, parece que esta zona definitivamente es una vivienda de pescadores, porque estamos encontrando varios elementos. Wow.
Wow, mira. Anzuelo.
Es un anzuelo trabajado.
Wow, mira otro.
Oh, mira.
Mira.
Ajá. A ver.
Mira, wow.
Este está más
Increíble.
grande.
Ese es más grande.
Mira, definitivamente son anzuelos de
Sí,
hueso.
mira, acá se nota la impronta del hilo para amarrarlo, ¿no?
Sí, definitivamente sí. Ahí
Sí.
está. De hecho, pareciera que han demorado bastante tiempo en hacerlo. Mira, hacer un objeto como este
Requiere bastante esfuerzo y trabajo.
y con herramientas tan rudimentarias, definitivamente toma tiempo.
Claro. Wow, no cabe duda que estamos ante un sitio, una vivienda de pescadores bien marcada.
Definitivamente.
Claro.
Up to the present time, we have communities of fishermen who are direct descendants from these groups of people. Because up to this day, we have fishermen and their families traditionally living in this area. For example, they associate the full moon to a species of fish known here as cachema. And coincidentally, each time there's a full moon, this fish, for some reason, comes near the surface and it is easier to catch, probably attracted by the light of the moon or some other factor. And this is a phenomenon that takes place up to this day.
De acuerdo a la historia, los chimus aparecen.
According to history, the Chimus appeared on this beach in 1238. They made a living from fishing, guided only by the stars, and they were excellent navigators. The little reed horseboats? They first started using these in 1238. And to this day, the fishing methods used by the Chimus has not changed at all.
No ha variado en absoluto, es el mismo que se sigue usando.
The fishermen currently follow the same practice. The system for fishing remains the same. They would look at the moon and say, "Now the moon is turning. The moon is full now. It will happen." And after dawn, they would also go fishing. They would gaze at the sky and watch the speed with which the sky moved. And they knew the sea currents they would encounter.
What is the mystery behind the moon's influence over the ocean? During the day, the level of the sea rises and falls, due mainly to the force of gravity of the moon over the earth. The highest tides, namely spring tides, occur twice a month, coinciding with the new moon and the full moon. This is when the sun and the moon are on a straight line with the earth, and its gravitational attraction adds up. The low tides, or neap tides, occur during the crescent moon and the waning moon, when the sun and the moon are on a right angle with the earth, counteracting the attraction.
Nosotros auguramos pues un mejor porvenir para.
We are trying to build a future where this tradition is preserved, because I think it is very valuable for the history of our people. A tool for fishing like this is extremely important. This is the only part in the world where this type of boat is used. So all the fishermen who come this way, they keep on using the same little reed boat, the same everything, the same way of manufacturing, of using it to fish, since the beginning of the tradition, dating back to 1238.
We are in the middle of the excavation process, in the Llamas, south of Gramalote. Here we have found, up till now, over 30 children, victims of sacrifice, and around 40 llamas, but there are probably many more. At the moment, we are digging what appears to be the skull of a child, and always next to a camelid. One can clearly see the perfectly well-preserved muscle, and some of the bones, probably part of a tail. And here, one can see the dark brown color of the llama. While in this area we have the child with his hair, the hair and some textile. There's probably another individual, another child buried in this area also. Here we have very clear evidence of a massive offering, where the sacrificed parties were the children and the camelids. This finding has many implications for archaeology. The most important of all is that the degree of preservation of the bodies and the degree of preservation of the fibers in the camelidae and the humans will allow us to understand issues that were never even dreamt of. Never before had we encountered such massive evidence of human and animal sacrifice. Practically all the children were placed both physically, that is, their body and their eyes, with their heads turned on purpose facing the sea. While the llamas were turned on purpose, both their necks and their heads, toward the east, that is, facing the mountains. Another thing we noticed is that in general, in burial grounds or graveyards of the Chimu culture, even the most simple graves have some pottery or some necklaces made from seashells or other elements. In this case, these children did not have any funerary offerings besides the llamas. These children had suffered from a very clear cut around the sternum or breastbone, with the aim most probably of breaking the thorax box and opening the ribs, probably to take something out. And the only visible organ in this area of the body that we can think of is the heart.
If we could travel back in time to the period in which these children who were sacrificed lived, we would find a disturbing and moving scene on the shores of the sea.
¿Qué número de individuos son estos?
Aquí tenemos el 34.
Y acá está el 33.
We have to start by estimating their age, so we shall work with their teeth. We will work with the bone joint. here in the laboratory of the Museum of the Chanchan site, located around half a mile away from the place where the 43 children and 74 llamas were found, we analyzed the remains of some of the individuals who were sacrificed. As you can see, the level of preservation of the remains is quite good, especially when it comes to the organic material.
La evidencia más directa que tenemos de sacrificios humanos.
The most obvious evidence linked to human sacrifices through these remains is a very clear incision down the central part of the breastbone. Here you can clearly see the mark where the sternum was broken into 2 parts, and sometimes in 3 parts. That cut can also be seen here, indicating that once the breastbone was broken, the ribs could be opened, gaining access into the area where the heart is found. The fact that there is a high number of children and teenagers in such a limited space might indicate that this was a burial ground exclusively for individuals of this age. However, the strategic layout of the bodies, always in a south-north position, and their skulls with the children's gaze facing the sea, indicates that whoever planned this had a very clear purpose in mind. This was a sacrifice offered to a divinity, probably to the moon, that ruled over the tides and the temperature of the ocean, according to the Chimu vision and ideas. This particular sacrifice was carried out in an open space, in front of the sea. Once more, this indicates that pre-Hispanic cultures were not only focused on building great cities, but that they also paid particular attention to the natural landscape that surrounded them, giving it a very high symbolic value.
Centuries after the priests sacrificed dozens of children, the fascination with the moon is still alive. We traveled to California to accompany a group of amateur photographers obsessed with obtaining the best possible images of the moon. The occasion is perfect. Our trip to San Francisco coincides with the arrival of the supermoon, when our satellite looks larger on the horizon due to its close proximity to Earth.
My name is Phil McGrew. I live in San Francisco. I'm an amateur photographer. My passion is night photography, and I like to specialize in moon photography, solar photography, star trails, and things like that. Night photography appeals to me. I think I can get longer exposures. The colors are more vibrant. I just enjoy the different feel that the night gives you. The shadows are different and less significant, and there's stars, and I think when you do night photography, especially if you can capture stars or moon or something like that, then it just gives you a sense that you're part of something larger. You're not just walking down the sidewalk of the city, you're living on Earth and there's a moon 250 million miles away. It just kind of puts you in your place a little bit. But my passion is moon photography, and I try to go out every month and take moon photographs. This is probably the hardest photo I've taken. This is about a 3/4 moon, and this is the International Space Station flying across the moon. And we were lucky there was no fog that day, and normally along the coast there's fog. And tonight is a supermoon, which is a little bit overhyped. The supermoon is about maybe 10 to 12% larger than a normal moon. My plan, since the moon rises in the east, my plan is to find a location in the west where I can see it rise over Coit Tower. And so the fog is supposed to stay clear and maybe roll in later after the shot. So in the summertime, we get more fog than we do in other seasons, so it's really difficult to get full moon photographs in the summer, but I think we're going to be lucky and get a shot this time. Sometimes you try to find some less popular spots, where not everybody's going to be there, so a lot of people will be up in the Marin Headlands tonight. There are fewer people will be down here. So yeah, you try to outsmart your friends every now and then and try to go to a spot maybe they didn't think of. So it's kind of fun to do that. To the left of Coit Tower right now, so it should come up. It's kind of satisfying because our calculations were correct. We thought this was a spot, but there's so many variables, so we're kind of happy to see it. I just wish it were a little darker. The size of the moon compared to the city right now is really, really big. To me, the reason I enjoy night photography or celestial photography is it kind of puts you in your place. It makes you realize how small you are and how insignificant you are in the universe. And if you had a bad day, the sun still comes up and the moon still comes up. I mean, that's 250 million miles away. I mean, and it orbits our planet, and it orbits with great predictability, and we know where it's going to be and when it's going to be there. And cultures 5,000 years ago knew where the moon was going to be and where the sun was going to be, and they've built temples and pyramids and things like that. And it's just amazing to think that this knowledge has existed for thousands of years, and that the significance that this has played in cultures and religions and ceremonies and things like that is just it's fascinating.
This initiative started a year ago, out of the desire to ride bicycles by night around this hill. Somehow we had the idea that a certain infrastructure was required to ride at night, such as streetlights, but the truth is, there is an underlying principle of environmental sustainability, related to the fact that the world needs unlit spaces. The world is becoming polluted by light, and somehow this is an oasis, a space free of artificial lights, which is hot as the city grows and more lights are added. The idea of cycling under the stars was born about a year ago. And now we have a cycling under the moon event, and as an original idea evolves, it has more of a poetical connection, a relationship with poetry, with the universe. We choose the idea of cycling under the moon for today's event, since there was a full moon yesterday, and it is nice that so many people have showed up. It is also good that everybody comes here with a good discipline. I believe that it is an event that can also influence people's attitudes.
My name is Marcelo Tala, and I'm an astronomy major from Chile's Catholic University. My enthusiasm is focused on that area, to conduct outreach on astronomy topics and influence as many people as possible, within my potentials. So everybody knows that we have a huge telescopes, access to the magnificent northern skies, and even, just standing here, we are able to observe celestial objects. We had the opportunity to see the full moon, constellations, and more. So basically, our goal is to bring astronomy to people. That's really where our motivation lies. Because, for instance, people are used to seeing the moon, and they watch it from the city, but all of a sudden, they see it through the telescope, and they rediscover it. And then, their reaction is, ah, right? They realize that the moon is not just a white ball with a gray spot in the middle. They can now see that it has craters, and then they begin to ask, hey, how are these craters formed? Why does the moon appear to be like that? And that's the nice part of interacting with people. Right from the first look, people begin to wonder, and then they begin to ask questions. It invites people to think. If I can teach astronomy to 600 cyclists, for me, it's a privilege to be there and spread all that knowledge that I have. To share my knowledge with people so that they too know why the moon is at that distance, how it came to be, where do stars come from.
I believe there is a relationship with the universe, the stars and the moon across all human cultures.
The next stop on our journey in search of the mysteries of the moon is Mexico City. At the heart of this crowded megacity lies the Grand Temple, the religious and ceremonial center of the great Aztec or Mexica Empire, a place where politics, religion, economy, and knowledge of the stars are intertwined as an indivisible whole. In this place, rich in history and heritage, we meet Mexican astronomer Julieta Fierro, who explains the importance of the moon in keeping time.
We're at a multi-purpose site used by the Mexicas prior to the European conquest of Mexico. All of the archaeological sites had multiple purposes. They were used as places of worship, power centers, markets. These archaeological sites also could be used as clocks or places for timekeeping. It is very difficult to give time a definition, to really know what it is. However, what we really know how to do is keep track of it. For all cultures around the planet, the transition of day to night constitutes the basis of timekeeping, and that's the first way. The second way is by counting the phases of the moon. Every 29.5 days, the moon becomes full. Then it wanes until it becomes a new moon. This cycle constitutes a month. I'm going to compare it to the regular, currently used calendar so that everyone can understand the original calendar. There were nights and days, and the month was the lunar calendar. There were about 30 days in a month. And the seasons would repeat themselves every 360 days. This means that there were 12 months of 30 days each in a 360-day year. And in fact, all the cultures had to make an adjustment for the leap year, because it's a little more than 360 days. So each culture invented its own way of making this adjustment.
The next stop in our journey is Colombia, where we meet a producer of documentary films who has maintained an important tradition concerning the moon.
I am Priscilla Padilla, a Colombian producer of documentary films. I've just completed a documentary film called The Eternal Night of the 12 Moons. My work has always revolved around the subject of women. The Eternal Night of the 12 Moons is the story of an indigenous Wayuu girl. The Wayuu are an indigenous culture that live by the Caribbean Sea north of Colombia. That's where this story takes place. When a girl reaches womanhood, she is sent to confinement in a hut of wood and mud, which is built specifically for her. In this community, there's a very strong relationship with the moon. All women, when pregnant, enjoy taking moonlight baths. And when a girl gets her first menstrual period, for the first 3 months, she's not allowed to move. In the middle of the Guajira region, I came across this girl, Filia Rosa Uriana, with whom we made this documentary film. I believe that in this community of Fili, the women still maintain this tradition of confinement. And I can say that for about 200 years, the women have still maintained this tradition. The confinement is a sacred ritual for the Wayuu culture. This tradition consists of the confinement of the girl, once she gets her first menstrual period, in a special hut set apart for her. As soon as the girl enters the hut, she's placed in a hammock, or chinchorro. The chinchorro, or hammock, is the bed for the Wayuu. After around 15 days of lying in the hammock, she gets her first bath with very cold water. It is very important to take moonlight baths, since the moon for the Wayuu culture represents the feminine power. It's believed that the moon strengthens a woman's body.
The last stop on our journey in search of the moon is in Houston, Texas.
This is the Saturn V, one of the vehicles designed to fly to the moon. These are very big and powerful rockets, all of which use chemical fuel. They use hydrogen and liquid oxygen to work. They store enormous quantities of fuel, which is used up very quickly. The first stage lasts only about 2.5 minutes. The second stage also lasts a very short time, enough to give adequate impulse to the vehicle and place it into orbit. The third stage sets the vehicle in a path known as translunar trajectory. This means that the vehicle is ejected from its orbit around Earth and into a path towards the moon. All these pieces break apart from the vehicle, and stage after stage, the vehicle becomes smaller until the only piece that reaches the moon is the upper section. This is made up of the service module, the lunar module, and the landing axis, the control panel. The actual capsule, it's very narrow, a very small thing. The astronauts were able to fit and live there, but the trip to the moon only lasted 3 days, so it wasn't a very long expedition. There's people who still don't believe that we reached the moon. Well, there's also people who still believe that the world is flat, right? There's people who don't believe that some things are true, but there's not much we can do about them. It's a small group of people which has these beliefs. But we still have to respect their beliefs, even if they're incorrect. The Lunar Project was an extraordinarily successful program. It's an extremely important chapter in space history for the United States and for the world. It's a chapter that we need to close and start a new chapter with new technologies, more interesting adventures, bigger and more beautiful, more plentiful. And we need to reach even more distant places. Eventually, humans will populate the Milky Way, the galaxy, the universe. We hope that humans will continue to expand their horizons. It's part of perhaps our final destiny in a more cosmic way. And our descendants will, at some point, reach the stars.